This show is brought to you by Imperial Yeast. You hear us gushing over Imperial Yeast all the time, and that's because their yeast performs for us in every batch we brew. Imperial Yeast is adored by commercial breweries and home brewers alike. Their pitch-right pouches are jam-packed with 200 billion fresh yeast cells, guaranteed to deliver flawless, fast fermentations every time. Imperial Yeast strains are grown by a team of pro brewers and home brewers in Portland, Oregon, who live to help brewers learn more and ferment better. Join our recipe-receiving Patreon groups and get a free upgrade to premium Imperial Yeast with every recipe kit that ships out to you. Learn more at patreon.com/homebrew happy hour and come brew with us.
Entertaining shows with content that spreads information and sparks discourse throughout the community. This is the Pearl Media Network.
Hey, and welcome to the Homebrew Happy Hour. This is the show where we supply the answers to your homebrewing questions and discuss all things related to craft beer. If you have a question you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, you can go to homebrewhappyhour.com and click on the submit a question link at the top of the page, or now you can call or text them in by using 325-305-6107. I am your host, Joshua Stubing, and today I am joined by the owner, operator, chief keg washer, El Jefe. He writes the checks and pays the bills around here, Mr. Todd Burns, as well as we have down there at the bottom, we have special guests today. I always like when we get to do these kinds of episodes, Todd, because one, you take the lead and I don't have to do anything. It's wonderful. I just sit back and I still get credit for being a part of the show. It's an incredible feeling when you take over. But I asked them how to pronounce their last names at the top, and I'm going to butcher them again. We are joined by Jason Weisfeld and Robert Peyser. Peyser.
There you go.
There you go.
That's right. Like geyser with a P. You told me that. They're from Kessler Thermometer, a family-owned business providing high-quality and accurate instruments to various industries since 1934. Guys, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having us, Josh and Todd.
Thank you guys both.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you for sticking around, even though I just butchered your name, Robert. My deepest apologies. What I'm going to do, I'm going to edit it and go back, and then I'm gonna say it correctly, and then people will be like, why were they giving him a hard time for he said it right? Because I can do that. I edit the show. But Todd, I wasn't joking.
No worries.
Yeah, I wasn't joking.
No, he's way too lazy to go back and do that. So I wouldn't worry about it.
He's not lying. Yeah, somebody on last week's episode or 2 weeks ago, I made some major flub, and I said in the show, "Oh, I'm gonna go back and edit it," and I said I probably won't because I'm lazy. And every time I say that, people, our listeners, pointed out like, "Yeah, you didn't go back and edit," and I go, "Yeah, because I'm not lying. It's not a live show, but it might as well be." Guys, 1934 is a long time to be doing instruments. We're gonna get into all the history and all that. I'm gonna let Todd take it over because Todd organized this whole thing. One, I want to thank y'all truly for coming on, because it's very cool when we get to talk to the people behind the tools that we're using as homebrewers. But mainly, I wanted Todd to look y'all in the face and confess how many hydrometers he's broken. I thought it'd be great. You're
going to start out with the hydrometer breakage. Yeah. It's a running joke on the show. I have broken more hydrometers than any home brewer in the history of the world. Like, I can't hardly. This is their hydrometer, by the way. I'm carefully holding it with both hands, and made in the USA. It's really neat because on this particular model, you actually have a thermometer built in as well, so you can do both, I believe. So that's pretty neat. But yeah, I am. There's just something about a hydrometer in my hands that I break it, and I have two hydrometers that I have not broken that were my dad's.
Wow.
That he's had since the 1950s. So that tells you how different we are when it comes to that. So tell us a little bit first about the history of the company. 1934. Wow. U.S. company in existence since 1934. I love that.
Yeah. I'll take that, Jay. Well, my father started Chase Instrument Company in 1946 making dairy thermometers. Back then, they didn't have automated equipment. He'd make $1 million a year by hand at like 20 cents a piece.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was tough. He went to college at night. During the day, he would work any job he could find. Garment center, flower market. And one day he stumbled upon a thermometer company. He worked there a few years, got drafted into World War II, came out of the Army, and said, you know what? I like making thermometers. And with a $5,000 GI Bill, he started Chase Instrument Company.
Wow.
Over the years, he built it up to the most prestigious hydrometer company in the world, known for high precision, accurate instruments. I joined the company in the late 70s, and I took over full-time running the company about late 1990s. In 2002, I bought Kessler Thermometer, which was the premier thermometer company in the world. We like to say world, maybe I'm pushing it. But they were started in 1934 by Walter H. Kessler. I bought it from his son-in-law, Denny Sutherland. And Kessler was very strong on thermometers, but a little weak on hydrometers. Chase was very strong on hydrometers, weak on thermometers. So it was a perfect marriage.
And then here I am. So I'm Bob's son, and I've, different last names, but I'm Bob's son, and decided, after a couple of years out of college working in real estate, I had an interest to learn a little bit more about the family business. So I got involved, and I've been here a few years now after, working over some summers here and there in high school and college, and, trying to keep it in the family.
That's awesome. You don't really. I was gonna say, not to interrupt, because as soon as I tell Todd he's in charge and then I take over, it's old habits. I apologize.
I'm used to that. It's okay.
It's just you don't see that a lot in our, just even in our country. Family owned and operated businesses going that long was, you buying Kessler from the family. Is that something to that industry, or y'all just coincidentally happen to just be family-focused companies simultaneously?
It's very common in our industry. It's generation to generation, and somehow everybody is intertwined. All the companies, relatives, one way or another.
Wow.
That's cool.
So you had on the hydrometers. You said your father originally was making thermometers for the dairy industry, but then he switched over to hydrometers.
His biggest customer at the time for dairy thermometers, and like I said, they used millions of them a year. Today, very few. Was this company called Taylor Instrument Company. And they're still around, Taylor, but at the time they were the biggest thermometer, hydrometer manufacturer in the country. And they were buying their hydrometers from an independent company, and the guy wanted to retire. So they asked my father, would you be interested in taking over his company and supplying us with hydrometers? My father said, yeah, absolutely. So they said, this guy, I forget his name, he'll teach you the business. So after about a week, my father saw that this guy had no interest in teaching him the business. And he said to him, you know what, the only way I'm going to learn it is if you leave. And he taught himself the business, and he came up with some production methods that I still use today.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So,
but the thing is, so he had one customer, Taylor Instrument, and after about 2 years in business, they said to him, "You know what? We're going to make everything in house." So now he's stuck without his biggest customer.
Wow.
But a few years later, they came back.
Yeah.
They
usually do when you're creating a good product, right?
Yeah, he always said to me, you want a lot of cows, not a bull.
Well, what is it on this hydrometer? One of the things I noticed, one of the reasons I contacted you originally is because I noticed that when I wasn't breaking hydrometers and I was using hydrometers, I saw a lot of variation in those. I also saw a lot of variation in thermometers. I actually did a test maybe a little over a month ago, a little before I contacted you. and I had 5 different hydrometers from 5 different manufacturers, and I put them all on the exact same temperature and took a reading and realized that the readings were pretty different. Interestingly enough, there was a hydrometer from France and a hydrometer from like the 1950s in the USA that were almost identical. And then I had 3 other hydrometers that were all made from different companies in China, and they were kind of all over the board. So I said, when you're brewing beer, you're off a few points, and it can really make a difference in your reading. So maybe we need a better hydrometer. What makes this a better hydrometer?
Our production methods, and also most of these brewing hydrometers for the home brew that are coming from China, they're putting one scale into all of them. They're mass produced. The scale length is a correlation between the volume of the body and the diameter of the stem. When we make them, we're measuring each and every glass piece before it gets a scale in it. Then once we scale it, we take 2 points on each one. We take a bottom point and we take a top point. And they have to be within a half a scale division. And if they're not, we change the scale and start it over.
Okay.
Doing all that extra work, we can't compete with China on price.
Yeah.
So I guess that's, the one negative is that we can't necessarily always compete with them on price. But something that I learned, I guess, recently is we were making a lot of these, the ones that you're holding now, those triple scale hydrometers, before I was at the company, I know. And once China, I guess somebody got a hold of one, they shared it with a Chinese manufacturer, and they actually took a scale from our hydrometer and is now using a knockoff version of their own scale with their own label maybe. But that's the same scale that you'll see from China. So you might notice they're very similar. But like Bob was saying, to be able to put one scale in, whether it's 100, 1,000, 1,000,000 different hydrometers, it's not going to be as consistent. But one thing that, I guess lets us stand out from our competition is that we're really manufacturing each individual piece by hand. And that's how we're able to get, the most accurate results, or at least one of the ways we're able to.
When my beer numbers on brew day have been off, I never thought to blame the inaccuracy of the Chinese hydrometer I've been using.
That's exactly what it was, Josh.
It wasn't me ever. Oh my goodness.
Exactly.
Your family's been in New York for multi-generation, right?
Oh yeah. And I have a very strong, not New York, but Queens,
right?
Yeah.
I love that accent. I really do. I just think it's the coolest accent that
I don't hear it, but I guess I have it. People tell me.
We should have had James on the show, because James has an extremely strong Texas accent. And, it would have been fun. In fact, we listened to an interview I did when I was about 20, and I had a lot more of an accent then, right, Josh?
Oh, super twanged. Yeah. No,
no, I think that's really a neat story. I love the fact that they're made here. I love the fact that they're more accurate. I did want to. I'm sitting here playing with all the products that you sent us here. We ordered them actually. So this is the other thing I want to ask about. So I don't know. This is a certification for this thermometer. So one of the problems we've had in the past, and anybody that brews with me can tell you that I'm just fanatical about the temperature. So I'm always checking the temperature, and then I'm using 2-3 different thermometers, and I'm always so aggravated because the thermometers aren't matching. Right? It's just, to me,
Right.
It's unbelievable how inaccurate most thermometers are. Like some of these metal dial thermometers that we get, we got a few at a trade show, Josh, and they're off by so much that you could adjust them. But even when you adjusted them, they would be off completely. If you adjusted them for 32 degrees by using the cold water deal, then they'd be completely off when you got them hotter. So on this one, we had this one is calibrated, and it is at 152 degrees, where a lot of us use that temperature a lot in brewing. This thermometer is actually going to read 152.2 degrees. So when I paid all that money to calibrate it, I only got 0.2 of 1 degree because it was already so accurate to begin with.
Right.
But it's wonderful now that I'm absolutely sure that that's the temperature, and I can calibrate any other thermometer I have or any other instrument I have by using this. To me, that's just a really cool thing. So
Yeah. I mean, you hit the nail right on the head there. We always recommend, especially for the brewing industry, but really any industries that are buying thermometers, hydrometers, it's important to have one master instrument. So let's use this thermometer for this case. We don't recommend using it as, one of your working thermometers, but just to kind of use it as your standard. No matter what, all of our thermometers are calibrated and they're going to be accurate, like you said. We won't, like our hydrometers that we kind of discussed before, we're not going to send something without testing it multiple times. We etch that on ourselves, all the different numbers and lines that you see. So every thermometer, you might see the 32 point on one thermometer is slightly higher than on another thermometer. Again, each individual thermometer is pointed and done by hand to really make sure that when you're reading the thermometer, it's 100% accurate. Now, we let ourselves, what is it, a half a degree, I believe, or half a scale division? Half a degree?
Yes.
So we give ourselves
half a scale division
because, at the end of the day, you're using the human eye and really just determining exactly where that line is ending. But anything outside of that half a scale division, if it's, if that 152 point we measure and it's reading 154, 155, we're not going to sell that one. We're not going to, we'll fix it. We'll replace it, whatever we have to do to make sure that comes in at a acceptable difference, I guess you could say.
So when I tested we had about 20 thermometers that quite literally looked almost identical to this, pretty typical lab thermometer. So I'm originally, I was a photographer, so I used these thermometers a lot when I was younger in the photo lab. And we had about 20 of them one day, and I got aggravated because there were two that were different. So I put all 20 in some water and got it at a certain temperature, and basically read each one and wrote it down and sent a letter to the manufacturer. So I probably shouldn't tell you that. You're like, we're not going to sell this guy anymore. And they were off as much as 3 degrees in both directions. So that means that the difference between those thermometers was as much as 5 or 6 degrees.
Yeah. Well, the thing with the home brewing industry is they generally use what we call school grade thermometers. They're not really accurate. Like you said, 3 degrees, 5 degrees. For, teaching a student how to measure temperature, it's not important, the accuracy.
Right.
And they're very inexpensive. And the home brew industry has adopted that because they are very price conscious.
That's a nice way of saying we're cheap, but I agree with you.
Yeah.
Well, if you're trying to, cheap. Yeah, we are. I mean, some of us are. Definitely.
It's funny though, because the home brewer seems he wants every gadget on the market, and he'll spend whatever. So it's like penny wise, pound foolish.
Yeah, it's a paradox, my friend, that we live in, because we on the retail side of things get people calling and like, I want to do a 10 faucet kegerator configuration, but I don't want to spend any money. What do y'all got? It's like, oh, huh. Yeah, I'm learning the value of investing in tools that streamline it and what's important in the brew day. And like y'all said, I'm sure all industries you work with would say the same thing that I'm about to say, but being in your temperature range for brewing, I've learned, is make or break for my beer. So it's super important and critical, I would argue, to have instrumentation that ensures I'm accurate, because I've brewed beer. I brew with my father. He's not on the show. Better for him. I brew with my pop, and we've had beers that have had more like estery flavors and notes at the end, and it's probably because we were on the higher end of a fermentation temperature range, or our mash could have been a little hotter than it should have, and that could have all been remedied in theory. User error is always a possibility, but it also could have been remedied by accurate instrumentation. You'll hear that a bunch with the industries you deal with on the importance of accuracy.
Absolutely. The analogy I always make about accurate instruments is, especially with the home brewer, the hydrometer is to the brewer as the compass is to the sailor. I'm sure you guys heard that before.
Yep.
And if the compass is inaccurate, the sailor is going to get lost and not get to his destination. And the same is true with the brewer.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, just on the example of the temperature that I was using earlier, if you're off by 5 degrees, you're going to be making a totally different type of sugar, and that sugar is going to ferment different, and it's going to change the flavor. It's going to change the mouthfeel. It's going to change so many things. So, and again, some of the thermometers that I see, which are, you've got a thermometer inside of here that I think the reason for this thermometer inside of this hydrometer is to kind of get an idea of what your temperature is on the hydrometer, because the reading can change depending on the temperature. Is that the purpose of that, or is the idea to actually get a temperature of when you're brewing?
Both, but
Okay.
if you want to get extreme precision and accuracy, you should use a separate thermometer. That is kind of like, that's not going to have the accuracy of a glass stem thermometer.
Right, and that's what I see. A lot of people are using a very inexpensive thermometer, or maybe a dial thermometer that they've never calibrated. And in that case, I don't know if they even realize they could be off 8 or 10 degrees in some cases. And I mean, you're going to have serious issues if you're off that much. So, it would make a big difference in my mind.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the other product that I thought was really neat is this refractometer. And I really like refractometers because I've never been able to break one, right? Now
there's a way.
Yeah, I've also broken my fair share of thermometers as well. And I like the glass lab thermometers, which are very delicate, Oh, by the way, something I really like on your thermometer, I have to tell you this. I have broken quite a few glass thermometers because they have a plastic cap on the end, and then the plastic cap has a loop. When you put them into your brew kettle, the blasted plastic cap comes off, and it falls down and either breaks or you get it lost in your brew the rest of the day. So incorporating that hole into the thermometer, it's a small touch, but man, that is never going to come off the end, right? So I love that too. That's really neat.
If you hit it and break hard enough, it'll come off.
Well, yeah, if I break it, but
don't challenge.
As long as you're not swinging it at somebody, you should be in good shape.
I like the fact that they've been on the show for just a few minutes now. They're already completely comfortable giving me a hard time, like everybody else, right?
It's another option that we offer.
The
Teflon.
Yeah.
All right, I'll let Jay.
No, I was about to say also something else we offer for, I think, all of our thermometers is we could Teflon coat them. For a few extra dollars, we'll surround the actual thermometer in a Teflon coating. So if one were to drop it, the thermometer may break, but everything will stay contained within the Teflon. So you don't have spill to clean up. You don't have anything. You don't have a big mess.
We would be very interested in carrying those as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure
that would be nice.
When we're in the shop ourselves, that's my preference too, because I've only been here for a few years, but I've definitely broken my fair share of thermometers as well.
Yeah, and when you break a thermometer in your brewing, you're likely to drop it into your beer, and then you've got glass in your beer.
And I'm sure most of your thermometers are this way, but just one little thing about ours. So as you mentioned, it's a blue liquid, and our liquid is a little bit different than the standard alcohol. It's something that I guess you developed yourself over a few years, where it's not mercury. And mercury, as Bob said, I know before we got on the show, is the gold standard, but it's pretty close, and it's going to be pretty accurate. And as close or I guess as accurate as you can be. That's not mercury,
especially for a brewing range.
Yeah, so that's something that helps stand us apart from not just our competition, but overseas manufacturers, and something that people come back to us and I guess help keeping us in business is our accuracy, and especially on that non-mercury, because although we still do have a lot of customers buying mercury, the brewing industry not so much, but we're still able to sell these to whether it's home brewers, microbrewers, whatever the case may be.
See, I find that last comment fascinating, because when I did talk to another thermometer company a while back, they specifically told me that nobody makes a mercury thermometer anymore. But you do make a mercury thermometer.
We do.
Still. Okay.
Mainly for the petroleum industry where they require it. But it's getting tougher and tougher because a lot of states have banned the sale of mercury products. And a good part of Europe has.
Oh, my dad loves to tell the story that when he was a kid and he would go to the dentist would always give them some mercury to play with when they went home. So they would take mercury and put it on a dime and move it around. And yeah, I don't think they do that anymore at the dentist. So, but this refractometer, I was going to say, has a really cool feature because you can. This is where I brew back here, and even though you can tell it's got quite a few lights, I still can't see my refractometer in the room. I always have to walk out the door over here and get into the sunlight to be able to see it. There's an LED light on it, Josh.
Yeah, you told me that when it came. Yeah,
so look at that.
That's awesome.
I just push on that light, it all lights up, and I can read it right here without having to go anywhere.
Now all you guys need to do is, with that LED light, also have it to be a big enough opening for his readers because he's going blind. And so if y'all could open that up.
Not a bad idea.
Yeah.
Look into that.
I'm in the same boat.
So I was going to give Todd a hard time 5 minutes ago when you put on your readers to find the refractometer. You know how good that makes me feel?
Yeah, and the great thing about the refractometer is you don't have to have readers because you can adjust it to your eyesight.
You're right. That is a good point. Refractometer is one of the tools that I have not incorporated into my brew day yet. But again, after tons of feedback from our audience and mainly just peer pressure from Todd, I'm going to end up getting one of y'all's to put into my mitts for brew day because again, it's easier to brew consistent, better beer when you have consistent instrumentation to use, right? Like if you dial, much like our brew system, no two brew systems are the same, if that makes sense, where there's some variants where like my mash tun may have a difference of degrees different than Todd's does. But once you dial in your own equipment, then you keep brewing and brewing on it, you're like, oh, I know where I need to be. I know I need to get my water up to here because then it's going to get down to the temperature range I need for that whole hour sitting in there during the mash. Where with like your refractometer or more like a thermometer and a hydrometer, or maybe just the thermometer. Once you have it dialed in, it's a lot easier to use. And once you have it consistent, that's what I need, consistently being reliable. And then I know, okay, I can make better beer now because I know what numbers I'm working with.
Yeah, we often feel like the refractometer, this one's adjustable, I'm sure, right? It actually is a knob, right? Yeah.
Yep.
So the one we have, you have to use a screwdriver on, so that's nice. But one of the things that's interesting in brewing is that you use the refractometer in the beginning, but then once you have alcohol in it, you have to switch over to the hydrometer, even if you have a refractometer. Right. So you're always going to end up using both, even if you have a refractometer. What are your thoughts on a refractometer versus a hydrometer?
My feeling is a refractometer is a little bit harder to read, to find out where the line cuts the scale. Right. Sometimes it could be very faded. So I'm partial to hydrometers. But then with hydrometers, it's important to know how to read them.
Well, we would love for you to elaborate on how to read them. What's your feeling on that?
Well, all our hydrometers are calibrated to be read at the bottom of the meniscus, with your eye level straight across the meniscus. Sometimes
what's a meniscus?
Meniscus. If you take a cup of water, and at the very top, there's kind of like a line at the very top, and the meniscus is what it attracts the atmosphere, so it pulls down a little bit on the hydrometer. So what you have to do is when you put in your hydrometer, we always push it down a little bit further than we're going to read it, just to what we call break the meniscus, break that surface tension.
Okay, that's where it floats up a little. Float's probably not the right word, but it kind of floats up on the scale, in a shape. And if you push it around a little bit, you're saying that becomes more flat, and then you can read it easier.
The meniscus has a thickness to it, so you want the top of the meniscus and the bottom. And the meniscus let's say on water, it might only be 1 millimeter.
Okay.
So you want to read it on the bottom. But
On the
sometimes
bottom.
with beer, it's opaque. You can't see that bottom of the meniscus. So then they read it on top, and you have to kind of guesstimate where it would read.
Okay. And if you say it's about a millimeter, then you could probably get an idea. It's not going to throw it off a lot, but it may throw it off half a point on the specific gravity, maybe.
That's why, even though we can make the most accurate instruments out there, if the end user is not using it correctly, it's not going to do them any good.
I feel like he was talking right to me.
Yeah.
It stung a little, and it wasn't on purpose. I know, but man,
you explained that whole thing, and it went in this ear and out that ear, Josh. Right?
Yeah, totally. Oh, next video we make, Todd, we'll do one using their instruments. And what did Robert say? Oh, something. Push down on it. Okay, that's 10-10. Okay,
we should do that because we could explain that and talk about.
You don't
want
to push too far. Just just enough to break the meniscus, the surface tension. Because if you push it too far, this hydrometer stem is going to collect water to it, and it will change the reading because now you're adding weight to the.
So I'm in a real catch-22 on this one. So I should ask your advice since I have the expert here. I have a problem that often my beer has carbonation in it by the time I take the final gravity reading because my fermenter also carbonates. So what happens to me is that it collects bubbles on the hydrometer. So I actually have to push it fairly hard down so it hits the bottom and that dislodges all the bubbles, and then I read it. But now you're saying I've collected liquid along this whole thing, so that's also throwing the measurement off. So I probably need to compensate for that a little bit.
Probably. I mean, if you could, rather than push it down, could you spin it?
Maybe. Yeah, I bet I could spin it. Sure.
Yeah, that would just.
Well, I'm going to try spinning it next time. Thanks. I learned something.
Well, I was going to,
I've learned quite a few things.
I'm surprised, Todd, that you haven't before, only because I was going to ask Bob, what's your opinion? I didn't want to sound like I was being sarcastic because most people, myself included, from early on of brewing, we always take it and we spin it. And then when it stops, we take the reading. And I've always just done it because that's what I've seen done. James does that with his hydrometer, and people online say doing that. Spinning is perfectly fine, right, for taking a reading?
You spin it. It's also breaking the surface tension. And don't spin it like a top, just a little bit. And then when it stabilizes, you take your reading.
Yeah, maybe I could go a little bit less vigorous of a spin.
Yeah, I mean it's a huge problem. It'll be off a lot when it starts to collect those bubbles, and it starts to collect them fairly fast. So it's always been a challenge for me to get a good reading. I just have to work at it a while.
Another thing people have a tendency to do is they take their hydrometer and they'll drop it into the solution, where the whole thing will, the gravity will force it through the liquid, maybe hit the bottom. Sometimes it'll break. The stem will get full of the liquid, throw off the reading. So we don't recommend that. I always say just gently put it into the solution, just maybe a couple of millimeters past where you think it's going to read. If you want to give it a little spin to get rid of the bubbles, and then take your reading.
Is there a volume that you would recommend that brewers, like, hey, to get the most accurate reading, at least have this volume of your beer so that you know it's accurate? Or is it just submersion is all that matters?
You want to have the diameter of the cylinder that you test in enough room where the hydrometer is not going to be clinging to the sides or hitting the sides.
So a lot of people actually just use this, what it comes in, to do the test. Is that a little too tight in your opinion?
You know what? It's not the best, but I'm sure they can make it work.
Yeah, they also make larger ones that have a stand on them, which I have one right out here. I broke it about 3 days ago. So
I was there when you broke it. It was great. He actually almost punched me in the face because I was getting my camera out to take a photo of it.
We carry those too.
Good.
Man.
You send me a gross of them so I can keep it here.
No, we've
I need
gone
a gross of each.
We've gone this whole show before we ended. We haven't talked about. I know before the show, y'all said you don't homebrew yet. We'd love to remedy that, but you're enthusiast of beer at least, right? Y'all like, what's your go-to beer as it's getting warmer up there in New York?
This past week, my other son brought home a case of Kona.
Oh,
yes,
Yeah, and I like that.
yeah,
There's a
that's good to
brewery
hear.
also out east. So we're from Long Island. We live on Long Island in New York. There's a brewery out east, Montauk Brewery, and they make some nice light summer beers. So I always find myself drinking some of that too.
Are y'all like in our state? You know, they have beer to go now during these crazy times with COVID. And I know talk about crazy. Y'all's neck of the woods is unfortunate, you know. And is it hard right now? Not obviously all the stuff going on makes it difficult, but in regards to what we're talking about right now, are breweries there doing all right and still able to sell their beer, or is everything kind of just shut down and you're not able to?
I guess it's hard to know for sure, just because I'm not walking into the breweries myself, and you know, we can't really walk into these restaurants. There's no restaurants open, there's no bars open where I'm sure a lot of these breweries are selling, and you know, they might still be making it. I'm not sure who's purchasing, but you do have those alcohol neighborhood distributors that are still carrying craft beers that we're seeing, and you know, they'll do the curbside delivery and pick up and whatnot. But I can't say for sure if the craft breweries are struggling a little bit right now. I would imagine so, just because, you know, the demand right now is a lot less, just because no one's eating out. You know, a lot of people aren't even bringing in at this point.
And there's so many good breweries there. I mean, one of my first breweries that I really appreciated, and it's been going a long time now, is Brooklyn Brewery.
I was going to bring that one up next.
Yeah, it's a great brewery.
Well, they make.
I've actually done a tour there before. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's not too far from us. That's probably 45 minutes outside of Brooklyn. And that was the next one I was going to bring up. So we have Montauk out east. We have Brooklyn to the west. So we're in a good spot. We could get a couple of good beers.
Yeah. So if next time I'm in the New York area, can I come by and see what you do?
Absolutely. Yeah, we'd love that.
That would be wonderful. I wish my dad could go. Maybe my dad's 85. He's a chemical engineer. And chemical engineers really like thermometers and hydrometers. So,
yeah. Before we real quick before we wrap it up, they can obviously, your website's Kessler USA, right? Right. But y'all don't sell direct. They would get that through like Cat Connection or whatever. But is there, like, if they wanted, besides, you know, Todd and I have briefly talked about making some how-to videos or whatnot. Do y'all have any material out there for someone wanting to maybe dive deeper into the accuracy of your instrumentation or all that kind of stuff?
We have an instruction sheet on how to read a hydrometer.
That would go a long way.
One thing we pride ourselves, and although, like you said, well, generally we try to sell to someone like a Cat Connection. If a customer ever has a question, whether it's through you or they have an instrument that they just bought from you, we're a smaller shop, being that we're family owned, and you know, we do have 20 to 30 employees in the shop. Doing all different things. But if you call the shop, you're not going to get an automated voice. You'll get one of the two of us, and we have no problem going to the back and making a how-to video of someone has a specific question, or giving instructions over the phone. If I don't know the answer, I'll put Bob on. So although we might not have the resources on the website, they're always available if someone were to need something.
I love it.
And y'all make so many other types of thermometers for so many industries. When I'm on your website, it's kind of overwhelming how many types of thermometers that you make. So I would imagine that even if somebody needs a precision thermometer, but it's not in the brewing industry, they could contact you and find a way to purchase some of these other products.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like that scene in Forrest Gump with the shrimp, where you're like, I had no idea there was that many kind of shrimp. Y'all's website, it's true, because we went to get some photos of the instruments for our website as we are selling them now, and our main lead for customer service, Zach, was like, which one do we fall under? Because there are so many different hydrometers.
And, so one thing we're trying to do, so funny you bring up, because there are so many different products on the website and the photos are lacking, let's say. we're in the middle of, we've actually just sent out some of these instruments for professional photos, since neither of us have the skill or capability to do that. And we're trying to redo the website so we can make it more user-friendly for somebody, like you said, like Zach. I actually think Zach emailed me. He's looking for photos, and I told him, hang tight. I'll get you something, because like I said, we sent them out. We're trying to get this stuff going while, this pandemic is hopefully over soon, but it's still ongoing. So we could really hit the ground running when it's over again, to make, I guess, your lives easier, anyone's life easier who's looking to use any of these instruments. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, again, I can't stress enough how grateful we are for y'all taking the time out of your day to come do the show with us. I'm glad, Todd, you were able to get this together. Todd's always, he was so excited. It was so funny because I normally do the scheduling, and he was like, next week. Or it was like 2 weeks ago, I guess, when we actually did the email. He goes, "Hey, we're gonna do this. I need you. I'll copy you on an email. We're gonna have these guys on the show." I was like, "Who are these guys?" He said, "Read the email." And so he gets so excited about the dorkiest of stuff. No offense to you guys, y'all aren't dorky.
We enjoy it. Yeah. The dorkiness, at least.
Yeah, but it really is. I said, I can't stress enough to home brewers, like, when you have good instrumentation that is accurate, it goes so far in saving you a headache, where you're like, sanitation and accurate instruments are like the two things that I wish I would have known from day one. Because if you don't have clean equipment, you can do everything right and you have crappy beer. If you don't have accurate reading instruments like your thermometer or your hydrometer, you can do everything right, or you think you're doing everything right, and you're out of temperature range. You're like, why does everything taste so estery? This is terrible. And so I'm glad y'all took the time to come on the show.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah,
thanks for having us. We appreciate it.
And if we're ever up there, we will definitely come hang out with you. And I say we because I'm tagging along on Todd's whole, if I'm ever up in New York. But
hey, whenever you guys are in New York, feel free to give us a buzz for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm definitely planning. My wife and I are planning on coming when some of this stuff's over. But I've got a niece that lives there and works in the fashion industry, and we want to see her and her boyfriend. So we're gonna come up. Hopefully sometime this year. So,
all right. Thanks.
New York is a great city.
No, I love it. It's one of my favorite places to visit. It's just an incredible place. People ask me what's the best thing to do in, like New York, Manhattan, and I'm like, just walk around and see things. It's just wonderful. So
you can walk 6 miles and not realize that you walk 6 miles because there's so much to see.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
I hope
we live 40 minutes outside the city, so we're not really technically in the city, even though Jason does live in the city.
Right.
Now he's home because of the pandemic.
Well, that's the other wonderful thing, though. You can, if you live in Queens, you can get on a subway and be in Manhattan in minutes and not have to fight any traffic or anything like that. So it's really nice.
Yeah. And now we're in Long Island.
Yeah.
Nice.
With that accent.
Yeah. Yeah. Bring some of your friends on the show next time. We'll have a good time. Thank you guys so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Okay.
And that will do it for this episode of the Homebrew Happy Hour. If you have a question you would like us to discuss on a future episode, go to homebrewhappyhour.com and click on the submit a question link at the top of the page. Or now you can call or text them in by using 325-305-6107. Thank you to our show sponsor, Imperial Yeast, for supporting us and the home brewing community. When you join any top tier of our Patreon community, you'll get free premium Imperial Yeast shipped out to you with your recipe kit. Get more info at patreon.com/homebrew happy hour. On behalf of Todd Burns, the absent James Carlson, and the Pearl Media Network, I'm Joshua Stubing. Thank you for listening.
This program is made possible by the checkbook of Mr. Todd Burns and by contributions to our newly launched Patreon by viewers like you. Visit patreon.com/homebrew happy hour and join our community. Thank you.